Welcome back to Without a Doubt, the podcast. The podcast where we celebrate living life authentically and organically as ourselves. We are the ones who believe in creating our own paths and living our truths out loud. Join in on an open and honest conversation about self-discovery and growth. I'm your girl Mad, your host, and your new sprinkle of reality. I'm here to remind you that it's okay to live life different and that you don't have to be what is expected of you, and that your happiness matters. And yes, even as baddies who know this about ourselves need this reminder too. Welcome to welcome to another episode here. This is part 2 with Suzi Fisher. If you guys missed the part 1 of this, you missed a bomb episode about diet culture and society and how a lot of what we do with food and how we eat and what we eat and our body image.
To this.
Exactly. How it all equates in just mental health together. We talked a lot about this. It's a pretty good podcast, so make sure you tune into that. This is part 2. So this one is going to be more about eating disorders, food issues, and we're definitely going to we're really going to get into this because I've had my own issues, which we talked about binge eating on the last episode.
But you never had a formal diagnosis,
I was
correct?
never formally diagnosed.
Yeah.
But
and that's important to explain that it is very important in order for there to be a actual diagnosis. It needs to be done by a healthcare provider, a physician.
Would that be like your physician?
Or a therapist, a licensed therapist. Dietitians are allowed to treat eating disorders. We are not allowed to diagnose.
So that's a good thing to know. Suzi does not diagnose them, but she's currently working on a program which she will be done at some point and has clients now. You do have clients currently that you work with.
Correct. So even though, yes, I'm not officially certified eating disorder specialist at that time, I'm taking a course and I am getting what's called supervision with a CEDS, which is a certified eating disorder specialist supervisor. And I do meet with her on a regular basis and she helps me with any of my difficult cases because I feel like we never stop learning and we could always get more information from others who are just wiser than ourselves.
Why did you decide to specialize in eating disorders?
That is such a good question. And I feel like I definitely became a dietitian because of my own lived experience with anorexia, and I'm very open about it. When I was in high school a very long time ago, no dinosaurs did not roam Madison, but it was a while ago. I don't remember the exact reason why all of a sudden I decided to stop eating or to start dieting, but I do remember that a boy told me that my thighs looked chubby when I sat, when we sit down, our thighs spread. I remember noticing that for the first time and thinking, whoa, he's kind of right. And maybe I am a little pudgy and maybe I do need to lose a little weight. And so I definitely started restricting and it just snowballed into something that became a very rough time in my life.
So like you would say like in high school or earlier than that?
No, I was in high school. I believe it was, and there were other extenuating factors which I'll get into because an eating disorder is not just about the food or wanting to change your body. There's usually an emotional aspect to it as well, a need for control in your life. I mean, there was some things going on in my life at that time. I had left a very structured, isolating private school that was very small. At the time, I did it on my own accord. It was not that I was forced to do so, but I felt very, restricted. Like I couldn't breathe at this school anymore. I didn't fully align with what was being taught in a religious manner at this school, and I felt like I needed to branch out, meet new people. But man, oh man, was it culture shock. And I guess I stupidly didn't expect it to be such culture shock of going from this little insular community and
to the general public.
Yeah, to being thrown into a very large public school where, please forgive your audience, but I literally had never gone to school with an African American.
What year are we in, Suzi?
Oh, it was the 1980s, but I was brought up in a very...
Where did you live?
North Miami Beach, Florida.
In Miami Beach, you never went to school in the 80s with an African American?
No,
Your school was mostly a Caucasian
I
people?
went to a secular school.
Like a Jewish school?
Yes, everybody was of the same
Okay, that makes
religion
sense
and religious
then.
beliefs.
Understandable.
And I'm going to be honest, I'm embarrassed to admit
When
this.
you say Miami, though, because
It was
I
North
think
Miami Beach,
North
but
Miami
in
is
my
very Jewish then.
my school was in Miami Beach, but the only individuals around us at the school who were of different colors, ethnicities, were individuals who worked in the school, like primarily the cafeteria, the custodians, and it's kind of shameful now that I look back at it and I realize, again, using curse words, how fucked up that is to be raised in that way where you're not realizing that there are other cultures.
Correct.
And
they sheltered you.
I was extremely sheltered. I was brought up in a very sheltered environment. And I do believe that had something to do with me needing that sense of control within myself. There were other things going on in my life, which I'm not going to get into on the podcast, but my way of controlling what was happening in my life was to control what I was putting in my mouth, my food. I don't remember everything about that period of time in my life because it was a very long time ago. But one specific thing I do remember was the very ritualistic way that I would eat, the food rules that were in place with what I ate.
Like, did you create those own rules yourself?
Yes, and pretty much every individual who is diagnosed with eating disorders has a lot of regimented behavior and a lot of food rules that they must abide by because the eating disorder tells them that they must abide by this.
It's part of their disorder.
Yes, and if not, XYZ is going to happen. And what happens is that when you're deep in the midst of an eating disorder, your eating disorder is very loud. So sometimes when I'm in session with somebody, I can so tell when their eating disorder is just so
it's like
loud.
That you're talking about like the food noise.
The food noise, but it's even stronger than food noise. It's actually a voice in their head telling them that they must do XYZ. They must go exercise. Otherwise, saying very negative things to them. Otherwise, you're just going to get fat. You're disgusting. Don't listen to her. She's lying to you. I'm telling you the truth. So what the eating disorder does, and this is what it did to me, I distinctly remember this. It's very isolating. It pulls you out of your social group because the eating disorder cannot live within societal norms.
Correct.
So
it's not accepted.
It's not accepted. And then it's also not okay to be living in that way, but it pulls you away from your parents, from your friends.
You start to kind of separate yourself a little
exactly.
bit because you do feel alone. Nobody understands those
exactly.
thoughts.
It's very self-isolating because also you need to keep up your ritualistic behavior. And
do you remember any of the rules and stuff you had in place?
I do, and I'll say some of them, and sometimes I'll catch myself doing things, and I'll go, "Whoa! I remember when I used to do that." But I'm going to talk about the isolation a little bit. I distinctly remember, and again, I'm in this public school and I didn't know a lot of people, so it was very hard for me too. I wasn't as outgoing back then. The eating disorder made me very much an introvert, and I was very ashamed of what I was doing. It wasn't an acceptable form of behavior. I got very thin. I was
gonna say,
I probably weighed at my lowest. I remember when I saw the therapist, I'm picturing my little books now that I used to fill out with her. I was probably like low 60s.
And you were in your teens.
I was about 16, 17. I was probably 16, 17 years old around that age. So imagine, even though I'm 4'10", weighing 60 something pounds, basically the next step was going to be a higher level of care, more of like an inpatient, which I never had to do, thank God. But I distinctly remember not wanting to eat lunch or only wanting to eat what I wanted to eat. And I'm definitely remembering a turkey sandwich, which I don't even eat meat anymore, which I'm laughing at this, on very low calorie bread. And I remember going and sitting in a bathroom stall just so that nobody would bother me and
eating like the turkey
or that
on low calorie bread,
or that I could eat in peace. People with eating disorders have a hard time being observed while they're eating, so I believe that was part of it. Probably against some of the rituals, but some of the rituals that I did have was I had to make this specific fruit salad, and I will never forget this. I had to cut the fruit into little tiny pieces, and it had to be made every week, and I had to have a big bowl of it. And then there was these tofu carob ball things. which now that I'm like, ooh, that sounds actually
You're vegan
pretty.
now, so.
Yeah, well, I'm not vegan, but I'm more plant based. I prefer plant based foods. I think back now, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's nothing really wrong with eating those, but they were like a whole meal for me, and I had to have them. Like there was like it had to be made, and I remember smushing up the tofu, and I don't remember what else I mixed with it. And then I remember rolling little balls.
I mean, you must have done that a lot of times every week for like a year, years.
Had to be done. And then I also developed a lot of food rules where I wasn't allowed to eat any fried food, chocolate. It took me a very long time to be able to eat fried food again and chocolate. Even I met my husband when I was 20, which is very young. And I was pretty recovered by then, but I still had issues eating things
I was
like.
going to say, were you going through that stuff when you met Mike? Because that's got to be hard to get into a relationship with someone when you have your own food issues, going out to eat for dates.
Exactly. So it was very hard for me, and I was in recovery. And at that time, I never saw a dietitian, which I found really interesting. It was never recommended. I just saw an eating disorder aligned therapist who is wonderful.
Did your mom, like, who was like, Suzi, this is a problem? Like, when did this
I
become
don't
a
remember exactly, but I do believe my mother sought out help for me because I don't think I would have known to go find a therapist.
Because at the
on my
time,
own.
did you know that you were anorexic?
No, I had no idea.
You were just creating food rules for yourself, dieting, restricting culture.
Exactly.
But
so
you didn't have a label
my
for it.
thing is I'm on a diet. I'm losing weight, but it blossomed from just being on a diet to like barely eating anything all day. Where I was
Were you
so
like a
restricted.
miserable kid?
Oh,
Did you have friends?
I had friends, but at that time I was a very depressed individual. It's very hard to be happy when your brain is not nourished, because when your brain is not being fed, it's very hard to think rationally. And that's why I do use this term for my eating disorder patients, and I use the term food as medicine. And I don't love that term per se for the average population, because I do feel if, God forbid, you have cancer, I'm sorry, but food is not your medicine. You need to go get chemo, probably, or radiation. You'd see an oncologist. So in that situation, no supplements are not going to take your cancer away from you. They may help you get
alleviate temporarily,
right, or they may help you get better and keep you stronger and keep you. The food is important, but that's not what's going to cure your cancer, kill cancer. But what's actually going to save the life of an eating disorder patient is food. So food is their medicine, and that's very hard for someone to wrap their head around when what they fear most is food and gaining weight.
But that's mostly for anorexic clients, you're saying. Because like a lot of binge eaters, are they they're binging because they're afraid it's like a weight loss thing?
It is, because I think with the binge eating, it's very complex actually. There's actually a cycle involved why binge eating happens. And the reason why binge eating starts, it's the first part of the cycle. It's like a little circular, if you all can picture it. The first part of the cycle is the diet restrict part of the cycle. So, gotta lose weight, need to get this weight off.
1,200 calories.
Yeah, if we're lucky. Sometimes people go 800 to 1,000, but 1,200 for some reason.
800 calories is nothing. It's air.
Do you know that your brain and your heart require 800 calories a day just to keep functioning? So 800 of those calories, if that's all you're eating, is going towards just keeping your brain and your heart functioning. If you're on 1,200 calories, that just leaves just enough calories. Me moving my arms, sitting here talking to you, it takes energy and calories. People don't realize that.
Yes, it does.
But for some reason, 1,200 became this number that a lot of women aspire, and they believe that this is what they need to lose weight. So one of the things, the diet restrict portion of the binge eating cycle is what actually fuels the binge. So I'm not just going to say women, because there's men that have binge eating disorder, binge eating issues, will do the diet restrict portion. They eat very little earlier up in the day. The end of the day comes, they really
Eat
realize,
an entire bag of cereal at 9:30 at night.
Thank you. They're starving. And
I don't even know if I was like necessarily starving. It's like,
again, even with anorexia, it doesn't always start with, oh, I need to lose weight, or it could be about emotional distress, control issues. You know, do they have another mental health issue like ADHD? Are they neurodivergent? You know, there's a lot of factors involved with that. Is there some gender identity issues, which is, you know, a lot of gender identity
goes hand in hand
body
with those.
dysphoria goes with eating disorders.
Makes sense.
Totally makes sense, because they're feeling very uncomfortable in their own
body.
skin, and therefore it manifests as an eating disorder. Binge eating is a little bit of a different, you know, disorder, where that starts with the diet restriction, and again the binge eating, the guilt and shame. But with them, again, food is their medicine. The most important thing to do is like what I told you, is you need to eat. And that's very hard for somebody to wrap their head around, because a lot of people, it'll start as a diet with them. I just want to change my body. I just want to lose weight. And again, not everybody who goes on a diet is going to end up with an eating disorder.
Right.
It's not that simple. There's a lot more involved. I'm sure when I was in high school, there were a million girls that went on diets and didn't end up with anorexia. For me, it was the perfect storm.
It just happened to be an extreme for you and
for me,
together.
Being a perfectionist, having some other emotional issues that were going on in my life, moving to a new school where I was a little scared. I'm not going to lie. It was my own.
Were you going to be able to fit in? You know,
I
you
didn't
wanted to look a type of way.
I didn't fit in. And interestingly enough, now I've actually recently met two women that I went to high school with. They were in my graduating class. I recognize their names. They do not know who I am at all.
No.
They do not remember me at all. We're actually close friends now, which is interesting. But I tell them now that I block out those 2 years of high school, because it was not a happy time for me. And I really don't have any friendships from that period of time in my life, where a lot of people came out with their high school friends, where
and you were isolating yourself with
exactly.
your anorexia.
So I had a mental health issue. I was self-isolating. I was not mentally well. And people that meet me now, they're like, I don't remember you. And I'm like, I'm not the same person. I was such an introvert back then.
It's so interesting. See, people remember me from high school, but they remember a different version of me. And that was like a chunkier girl.
Isn't that amazing?
Like, I was at a bar, and this guy came up to me once, and he's like, you were fat in high school.
Oh my God, but that's so insulting. Would we say, I mean,
maybe that's part of like when I was still binge eating at that time in
my
life.
question is, what was your response to him?
I was at a bar, and I was thinking, I'm like, weren't you that fucking annoying kid in high school?
See,
and for me, I think I have.
But then, in a way, saying that back to him is two wrongs to make a right.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're right. But
you
I
may have thought it,
for
though.
so many times in my life, I have been told like you were chunky or fat or name called.
But
so for me, it's like a defense.
It's so
mechanism.
interesting to me. Instead of it saying, oh, Madison, you were that cool, quirky girl, and you had this great...
Some people do have that, but some people that don't know me remember me as a heavy girl.
That's so interesting. So they're remembering you just by your body shape, so it's
size, like those
not
words,
who you were. It's
but those words, when you heard those, and I was going through my weight loss phase at that time.
Very hurtful.
It was very hurtful.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, I didn't think I was fat in high school. I look at my pictures,
and I'm going to be honest.
In high school, Susie, I was like average.
I was going to be honest. You probably were not heavy.
I wasn't. I was average. I look at my picture, and I'm like, okay, little chubby cheeks, but
so that talks to how
it was fat shaming.
It was fat shaming, which is completely inappropriate.
And that's a good question to go into this.
Yeah.
Why is food such a correlation to image?
It's a good point, because image has to do, and it shouldn't, but our body image is tied to the number on the scale. The only way a lot of primarily women feel like they can change the number on the scale is by dieting. And then when you're dieting, it affects your food choices. But what is missed in all this is your body image technically has nothing to do with the number on the scale. So let's think about body image, of how you would describe yourself, because your body includes also your mind, your personality, things you've accomplished. So sometimes when I'll ask clients what they think about themselves, they have to think long and hard.
Oh, I think of the first word I know, mine would say, I'm strong.
Okay, that's a beautiful thing to say. And you automatically thought outside the box and you thought of something that had nothing to do with your physicality. But right away, a lot of my clients go to their physicality and they're very unhappy with their physicality. But let's talk about who you are as a person. You are not your body.
Right.
So, there's plenty of people in our society who've done really amazing things who are not in what's considered a societal ideal body.
Right.
And I think we forget to talk about, well, I'm a really good person. I like to volunteer. I take in foster animals. I feel like I'm really genuine. I care for other people. We forget that has more to do with who we are as a person versus, well, the number on the scale is this. And I like to ask people, when you apply to college or when you apply for a job, you have a resume. It lists all your accomplishments. Never once does it ask you what your height and weight are.
Well, maybe it has to do with the whole, that's the first thing you do your whole life. Every pediatrician appointment is they weigh you.
Which is understandable.
It's
why
their measurement tool to see if you're
exactly.
in percentile.
That they're plotting you on the growth curve.
I'm the 90s kid.
Right.
I'm the kid that when I was on the growth chart, I was a little over whatever, not the average. They were telling my mom, hey, your boys are husky. That was a term in the 90s. They made boys' clothes husky.
J.C. Penney had husky size.
My brother bought
horrible.
huskies.
I know what a horrible word that is.
And
that's a dog breed. That's not like a person.
100. I agree. So even for girls, like when there's a plus size, right? They make plus size. Why do we have to put that? And you put the weight, like your entire life, that weight number does kind of dictate if you're healthy as a kid.
Yeah.
And then as you get older in school, when you play sports, they do weigh you.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, for some reason, that number holds such a hard thing about who you are.
It does. It also,
even though it doesn't mean shit.
It doesn't mean shit. And honestly, the same thing holds true for clothing size. And
Ugh.
what I
hate that one the most.
Well, what I like to tell my clients is, okay, if having the smaller clothing size is very harmful for you mentally, because I could imagine if you're now a size 12 and you were a size 8 a year ago, and that size 8 pants and those size 8 shorts are staring back at you from your closet, I feel like that is self-harm.
It is so hard.
So the most...
You put on your favorite pair of jeans that you've been wearing for 2 years, and then this last year, you put on 10 pounds and they're tight. Well, you know how hard it is to find your favorite pair of jeans again?
It is, and I validate that.
And then they want to keep squeezing into them. Guess what? And your body doesn't feel good in them. So just go and try to find the next size.
So I validate that feeling of not feeling good, and it can be really sad that your comfiest pants don't fit anymore, and we could validate that statement. But we could also talk about forcing your current body into those pants is also a form of self-harm.
So harmful.
So what's the flip side? What is self-love? So we'll talk a little bit about self-love. And I know we talked a little bit about positive affirmations, but part of self-love is going out and buying clothes that fit your current body.
So my grandma growing up would always tell me, and this sticks with me more than anything, she'd say, just buy the size that fits you. Nobody knows what size it is.
And your grandma is so wise.
Yeah, and then I remember being at Kmart, by the way, during this. And I think I was just trying to buy the smaller sizes because I wanted to be a junior 5'7", but I was like an 11, 13, you know?
And what does it really matter?
My grandma said nobody saw your size pants. They're inside.
Exactly. And it's just like when you, again, are applying for a job, they want to know what qualifies you for this position. They don't care what size pants you are wearing.
And if they are
then
judging you, then that's discrimination, and you don't want to be working there anymore.
I was about to say, that's not a place you want to work if all they're looking at is your body shape and size. And I will preface this too, if the people you are hanging out with are so concerned and aligned about what your body looks like, then maybe also you need to surround yourself with a more positive group of friends.
Agreed.
And I feel the same about Instagram feeds.
Delete, unfollow, block all those people that don't make you feel good. I do it all the time.
Thank you. So if someone's feeling icky to you, okay, or their message feels icky to you, there's a reason why it's not feeling okay. So I like to tell my clients, if you're feeling you want to talk about body neutrality or body positivity, put that in the search bar. I guarantee you a ton of people are going to come up. Go through their feed. Find the person that really speaks to you. I'm not a huge...
And it's okay if somebody that you used to follow doesn't resonate anymore. Unfollow
Exactly.
later,
And
because
yes.
what they're into changes too.
Exactly. Because just like I've evolved in my practice as a dietitian.
Correct.
I've evolved completely and been on a different journey with my practice. Human beings can do that. Anybody can do that too, and change their mind and change what they're aligned with. And sometimes a lot of it is the larger you get on social media, sometimes
people are meaner.
It's also sometimes the message changes to fit the masses.
Okay, that's where you're going.
That's
you're
where
right.
I was going with that, to attract more people to follow them, because maybe they're selling something and a lot of it becomes about money, and I feel like money muddies a lot of social media. Where
Correct.
that's why it's so curated and disingenuous.
You're right. You're so right.
And I think that's why I don't love Instagram that much, and why I struggle so much with it. Why I would like to do Instagram, but I feel like I don't.
Then I'm gonna just give you the advice you just told you.
Yeah, I don't need to do.
Go in and find the account
Well,
to make
I
you
have.
feel better.
I do. I follow all the ballerinas from the elite ballet companies that I enjoy, because I enjoy that.
I think we are so overly flooded with that image, and the body image is very heavily talked about, and we talk about how we talked a lot about fat shaming, and then you talked about how you're small, but like when we were talking about having a smaller body doesn't necessarily mean that you're fit, and having a smaller body doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy.
No, because again, you could be living in a smaller body and still be like, okay, I was 60 something pounds in high school. I wouldn't count that as being healthy. I was a depressed human being who literally, when you have an anorexia, you grow what's called lanugo on your arms, like, you almost get like an animal fur to keep you warm.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's very interesting how our bodies.
I had no idea.
I knew you'd find that interesting. Our bodies
interesting.
adapt to what it needs, because our bodies are wired to keep us alive.
Correct.
So that's one of the protective mechanisms to keep you warm, because I distinctly remember I was constantly freezing cold. Had no body fat. I would not call that a healthy person. I was socially inept. I didn't have a lot of friendships.
But there are some people that look at that image and will say that is healthy. But I mean,
and that's
the societal thought process on what you look like in health, and they don't really correlate.
No, and listen, I'm not going to skinny shame any person either, and tell someone that if they want to be a certain body size, that's great for them. But I feel like don't push it on other people.
Correct.
I'm not going to go, for example, on Instagram and do one of those, look what I ate in a day, because again, I'm quite aware that I have less body mass than other individuals.
You don't need as much food as someone like my size.
And
we're different.
And that makes perfect sense.
Correct.
But on the days that I do work out more, I probably eat more than you do.
Yeah.
So again, every day is not going to be the same. And that's a theme that I like to talk about with my clients as well, that actually gives them a lot of comfort, that every day does not need to be the same.
Every day is different.
Every day is different, and that's okay. Some days you are going to be a little bit in a funk. Some days you're going to feel great. Some days are going to be hungrier days than others.
There's going to be some days that you're not happy with food. There's going to be some days that you do love the food that you're putting in your body.
It's every day is going to fluctuate. And even in eating disorder care, there's going to be days where things come a little easier to you, and then there's going to be days where that eating disorder voice is so loud and so extreme that you're having trouble, and you're maybe a little more ritualized that day.
Yeah.
And so you move on, you acknowledge it, you move on, and then next day is a different day.
Correct. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
And nothing is linear. We said that earlier.
Nothing is linear in life, especially not recovery. Recovery is not linear. Recovery has its ups and downs, and relapse is part of recovery. It's very important to understand that relapse is possible. I know in drug treatment they do consider,
a little different,
but they do consider relapse as part of recovery, because I look at relapse as a learning experience. Clearly, I don't want any of my clients to relapse. My goal for them is to move on, live healthy lives, stop the eating disorder voices, be okay with the food in front of them. For an eating disorder patient, a lot of them, weight restoration is very important, but I think this statistic is actually very important to acknowledge, is that only 6% of all individuals diagnosed with eating disorders are actually at a very low BMI, or what would be considered a very low body weight. But the DSM-5, which sets the diagnostic standards of a lot of mental health issues and sets the diagnostic standards for eating disorders as well, BMI is a diagnostic standard where there you're talking about fat bias and weight bias, where somebody could still have anorexia and live in a larger body. And that's very hard for a lot of my clients to wrap their heads around.
I mean, it's hard for anybody to think, because ideally you think anorexia thin.
You think bag of bones, you think extremely emaciated, but that's actually not true. And then I've had clients say to me, it really bothers them. I'm a really bad anorexic. I should look a certain way.
Oh.
It's a very interesting.
That's their body image with their food disorder side by side.
100%. It's
almost like
it's a very interesting dynamic.
They're like guilty for not.
Yes.
Wow.
They're feeling very guilty that they're not in the body they want.
And they still have that problem.
And they're not, sometimes also.
They're like a failure.
Yes. Sometimes
they're failing at the same time as already failing.
They're failing at being an eating disorder, but they also feel like their family members or friends or whoever isn't going to believe them because they don't look sick. So that's another issue that is very hard to wrap your head around. And all my binge eaters live in average size bodies, all of them.
I feel like I had an average size fit body when I was a binge eater.
Of course, you could have anorexia and be in an average size fit body.
People didn't know that I was a fitness instructor, and I would eat a box of cereal at night.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was...
Which I don't do anymore.
But I'm sure that was... Which, congratulations.
I don't buy cereal anymore.
Well, maybe you
can't have it in the house.
I was going to say, but you know the
I
things that
restrict
trigger
myself
you.
from that, but...
Don't use the word restrict.
I do not buy it.
But I think that's more self-care and self-love of yourself.
I do actually have cereal. We have cornflakes in there, but I don't eat them.
It's not that you're restricting yourself in the cereal. It's more self-love. I want you to reframe it.
Yeah, it is self-love.
It's self-love because you know that you...
I don't want to feel bad later.
And I'm going to be honest with you. There are certain foods that I do not keep in the house.
For me.
Exactly. So for me, I'll let your audience know some of my triggers because I'll
share.
My clients like to know.
I love them.
Yeah, my clients like to know because I don't want them to think
Cereal
I'm perfect.
And cookies are any sugary kind
That's
of
a little
like
bit of a
grab and go is a huge trigger.
So
for me.
So for you, the self-love and self-care of yourself is not to bring that in the house. For me, it's things that are crunchy, salty, cheesy, like Doritos. Cheese doodles.
Ooh, I love that stuff too, though.
Goldfish crackers, Cheez-Its.
Yeah, because once I open the bag, I can eat the whole bag.
Exactly. I mean, now that I am literally in session with clients all day, I clearly cannot snack all day. But
so, like, what do you do instead? Where that's the stuff you like to snack on. So, what do you do?
I eat nuts. I mean, if I need something crunchy,
you won't buy like the cheesy snacks.
I will not buy a full bag of it because I know sometimes it's easier for me to see I know my own body when something has a beginning and when it has an end. So if anything, I would get an individual bag and I can eat that. Yeah, I can eat that.
That's why I used to portion out a lot.
So it's a visualization and that's okay. But I know for myself, for self-love for myself, that, and also my IBS does not love it when I eat potato chips or nacho cheese chips, that my tummy does not feel happy. But I'll make popcorn, or I have pretzels in the house and I'll have pretzels, just to get that salty crunchy. But I do know the things that trigger me, and I feel like that's very self-caring of myself not to have those foods in the house, but I know it's very difficult for me.
Okay, Suzi. Yeah. I love myself by not buying cereal for my house.
I love that. I think that that's so and I know you're giggling and laughing.
It makes me laugh, but it's true because
it is silly to say that, I love myself, but it makes sense.
I have come a long way in my food process. So much
you're thinking,
so much so that when we go down the aisle, I literally will look at cereal and be like, that would be so good, like before bed, just to eat it dry. And they actually have a cereal that's called like a sleep. It's like a nighttime. I took a picture of it. I was gonna send it to you.
Never seen that.
Because I was gonna be like, Suzi, they make this and it's targeted for nighttime cereal eaters.
It probably has like magnesium in it that makes you like a little tired.
The box looked healthy, but when I looked at the ingredients, it had a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah.
And then I was like.
And again, we should
talk. But I thought about it.
We should talk about marketing, though. So the marketing was telling you this is gonna maybe somebody who isn't sleeping very well, and may need that to get to sleep. But in reality, is there's nothing wrong with having nighttime snacks. I'm a big fan. If someone's hungry, do not go to bed hungry. Honor those hunger cues. It kind of is a little messed up that they're marketing for that reason, because you don't need to, if your hunger is if your fullness cues are there, you're not hungry. I mean, you're having trouble sleeping. Number one, go check out, why am I having trouble sleeping? Maybe you just need a little supplementation, but go talk to your doctor if you're having problems.
I saw that and it made me think of you, because that's the time I like to eat cereals at night. It's a dessert for me because it is so sugary. It's like candy.
And then for you, it's not something that you deem as something healthy for your mental health.
It doesn't make me feel good.
Exactly.
I just feel like you have to do things that are good for you. You have to find foods that nourish you and make you feel good.
A lot of it is about finding those things that align with you. And I believe that what happens a lot is food is placed in baskets of good and bad. So we place a lot of moral value onto food. And that's where the problem lies, is when there's that moral value placed on cookies bad, apples good. Where we can't look at food in that way, because, okay, if all you ate were apples all day,
that wouldn't be good for you.
Exactly. That's not a nutrient dense way to eat either. There's nothing wrong with eating cookies and adding them into your diet and having them is part of the balance.
I'm with you.
So a lot of work that I do with clients is breaking down those moral value.
You taught me that.
Yeah.
Palmiti noodles versus spaghetti noodles.
And it's not
that they were bad. You're just like, Madison, why?
Right.
What is the purpose of the food for you?
And for you, it was to cut.
Is it a restriction or is it because you want it?
And it was restriction.
And that's where we are going to place. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. Yeah. It's the way I was utilizing it was not good.
You thought you were being mindful, but again, you were doing mindful restriction.
Yeah, and I've learned. So yesterday, I feel like this is really something you'd be really proud of. I really love a Pop-Tart.
Oh my gosh, I haven't had a Pop-Tart in years.
I haven't had a Pop-Tart in a long time, but my brother stayed here when I went away last month.
Okay.
And my brother requested Pop-Tarts. My mom buys them for him. You heard my story
about
my mom buying crap. Yes. She buys it. So I got him Pop-Tarts. Well, there was a Pop-Tart left here. And the Pop-Tart was like really crumbled in the bag. I could have thrown it away.
Was it calling your name though?
It was calling my name.
It was calling Madison.
So I took a bowl out. And I took out some Greek yogurt.
I knew you were going to say that, and you mixed it up with it.
I put one of the Pop-Tarts
I love that you did that.
In the Greek yogurt.
I love it.
And I told Kendra, do you want the other half of the Pop-Tart in the Greek yogurt? And she thought I was so disgusting.
It probably tasted so good.
It was the most delicious snack I made in a long time.
What you did is you diminished the moral stigma of the Pop-Tarts, and then you also mixed it with something that you felt was more nutrient dense.
I was thinking myself, because I was hungry, and I knew eating the Pop-Tart was going to satisfy me in the sweetness, but it wasn't going to give me what I wanted in the filling.
You were going to be hungry in half
an hour. And I know. But honestly, I was very proud of myself, because
I'm very proud of you too.
There's been moments where like I would have eaten that whole bag of Pop-Tarts and then later gone back and eaten the Greek yogurt and walnuts and honey, because I didn't make a smarter.
Exactly.
I've been really focusing on food and nourishment, so I love that. I wanted to share that with you.
And I do love that, and I love that you looked at nourishing your body versus like, oh my God, I'm eating a Pop-Tart. I love that you did that.
I think we need to start focusing on that, and that's a whole nother podcast in itself. We shouldn't treat ourselves like a dog. You do not need a treat when you were a good girl. You're not.
That's right.
You're not a doggy. So I said, you also don't need to deprive yourself because you're not a prisoner.
No.
Okay, you're allowed to go get yourself that McDonald's fry if you want it.
100%.
And we have the power to feel better in our own bodies, our own way.
I do love that.
And like I wrote that down. I felt like I was like, I hate when people are like, me and Kendra say like, can we go get a treat? But when it's like the treat is like a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. That's what we call a treat for her. Because I'm like, we don't need to spend our money on that. That's a financial treat.
I was going to say that's different. That's a financial treat. It's not a food treat.
Like for me, Suzi, I've come a long way. I feel like I would have been like, I can only have one Dunkin' Donuts coffee a week.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like if I want to go and get 3 a week, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that healthy? Not necessarily. But I walk every day. I'm drinking a gallon of water. And I do other things.
And I'm going to be honest, even if you weren't, you're still entitled to go get that food if you want to have it.
Because your body and living your life happy is the goal.
Can I be honest? 100%. And it's living your life on your terms as long as you're doing it in a healthy way. as we highlighted in the earlier part of the segment, of being careful. Okay, so you're not getting so regimented and ritualized where you do end up with an eating disorder or disordered eating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then seek out the help if you do need it. That's why I want.
Yes.
Also, I'm going to put this one in my second part. It's in
Yeah.
part 1. Suzi's link on how you can get in touch with her.
Yeah, I
will be here. If you're looking for dietitian help, she'll give you she has consultations.
I see clients, I see them initially for 90 minutes, do take major medical insurance. It depends on your state. The link will tell you.
So if you're interested, just click
and
and
the link
email,
will tell
whatever.
you. The link will tell you if you're not eligible to see me. How does that sound?
That's perfect.
It actually lets you know.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Super easy. I'll drop it
Yeah.
below so you have that. As always, make sure you leave a review, follow on Instagram and on YouTube at Without a Doubt the podcast. Thanks for being here. And without a doubt, you are a badass. Don't you forget it. Peace out. It's your girl Mad.